January the 22nd, 2017, with Louise Weesie Parker.
Although it's June, not January.
It is June, not January. Please excuse me. Uh, and how did you come to Cedartown?
I was born in Cedartown. My parents were both from South Carolina. My daddy came to Cedartown to work with his uncle, who was Howard Edwards, and he owned the paper mill down at the foot of Wissahickon Avenue. And Daddy came probably in 1919, and he and Mother married in 1920, and they bought the house at 127 College Street and moved in it and never moved. I never moved while I was growing up. I always lived in that house. And that is, the house was, we sold the house to the Baptist church, and that is on the north side of the Baptist church where the present garden is. So I was born in the garden of the Baptist church.
Ah, how neat. And your father's full name was?
Berriman Edwards Woodruff, and my mother's name was Louise Coleman Woodruff. And Daddy was from Darlington, South Carolina. Mother was from Aiken, South Carolina. But she went to Darlington to teach school and met and married Daddy.
And what year did they move to Cedartown?
1920. They married in 1920 and moved to Cedartown in 1920. And I had an older brother who was Ned Woodruff Jr., and he was born in 22, and I was born in 26.
And what did your mother do? Was she a stay-at-home mom in those days?
No, she was not. She was part of the time, but she taught school, and for a number of years, and then she became the librarian at the Hawks Library.
Was she the first librarian?
No, she was not. She was about the third. I can't remember the lady's name who was the first librarian, but the second one was Mary Mercer, who was Clark Mercer's wife. And then Mother followed Mary Mercer.
And how many years was your mother there? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly how long. It was 10 or 15 years, and she then went to the high school to start a library in the high school. The high school at that time did not have a library. There were no libraries in any of the schools. And Mr. Perks, who was the superintendent of schools, got Mother to come down and help him start a library, and she would go down in the mornings and work at the school getting the library set up down there, and then she would come back to...
You're saying your mother was both at the high school and at the Hawks Children's Library at the same time?
At the same time. She did the school in the mornings and the Hawks Library in the afternoon. And then it was probably about the time that Fred and I were going to be married, the summer that we were going to be married. She decided she would stop working at the library and just continue with the school. And that way she had the summer off so she could put the wedding on.
Ah, how neat. And so your husband was Fred Parker, and how did you and Mr. Parker meet?
We met on a blind date. Fred's sister was Beth Parker Hunt, and Fred had come back to Cedartown after being in the service and was living at home with his parents, and Beth was there too prior to her marriage to Van Hunt. And Fred said, "Get me a date, Beth." And she said, "Okay, I'll ask Weesie to come." And Van and I went up to the Parker House on Highland Avenue, and we had a bridge game, and that was my first date with Fred.
And was it a budding romance from the beginning?
Not essentially, but we knew we liked each other.
And how long did the courtship last?
We married after 2 years. I was teaching school, and I talked him into marrying me so I could quit teaching.
And what years did you teach?
I believe it was 48 to 52. Fred and I married the summer of 52.
And what did Mr. Parker do?
Fred was a building contractor. He came to Cedartown to work for H.E. Haney Construction Company, and then later he bought H.E. Haney. And we had a very good life.
Was he in the building industry all of his career?
Beg your pardon?
Was he in the building industry all of his career?
Yes.
Okay.
He was in building before he came to Cedartown in Atlanta. And then he decided he wanted to get back to Cedartown and not live in Atlanta.
So he was really a Cedartown native. He had just strayed. Is that correct?
That's right. He grew up on Highland Avenue, graduated from Cedartown High School, and then graduated from Georgia Tech. And of course I graduated from the University of Georgia, so we had a house divided always.
And that's something that's going on today. I see those license plates that are house divided. What are your memories from the Hawks Library?
I have very pleasant memories because I would go in there after school and see Mother and tell her what I was going to do for the rest of the afternoon. And if there were new books in, she would say, "There's a new so-and-so book in. Do you want to take that home and read it before I catalog it?" And I'd say yes, and I loved reading the brand new books. And one of my most vivid memories was looking out those big windows at the back of the library, and whether you can believe it or not, there was a house out there right behind the library, and it was on a mound of dirt, a hill-like, and it wasn't as high as the clustery windows there in the back of the library, but I could look out the library windows and look underneath the house, and I could see the ladies' chickens pecking around under the house. And then later, I don't remember when the house was removed, but it was torn down and the ground was leveled, and that's where our garden is, out there in the back. And there was a house there. Miss Booze lived there, and the house across the street from the library was, in the beginning, the Booze Hotel. And I don't know whether they were related or not, but I would think surely they were, since the Booze Hotel was on one corner and her house was practically on the next corner.
That's interesting. Do you remember, was the children's section downstairs that you can remember?
At one time it was. Originally it was upstairs, and then I don't remember the years, but they moved the children's literature downstairs in the basement. The only problem was you had to have a librarian on each floor, and the city didn't have enough money to pay for 2 librarians. And Mother had some helpers, and she would send them down there to check out books and keep an eye on the children. But that basement in the library had a tendency to flood even then, and I think the flooding caused it to have to be moved back upstairs.
Do you remember during that time period if there was a large clientele at the library?
Yes, there were a good many people that came, and I think my mother would have been arrested in this day and time if a child got a book and came to the desk to check it out, for Mother to check it out. She would look down and look at the book, and then she'd look up at the child and she'd say, "This isn't a good book for you. Go back and get another one." And she would take that book and chunk it under the desk so the child couldn't get it. They had to go back and get a different book.
Could that have been part of the fact that the children's literature and the adult literature were on the same floor?
I think probably it was, but she had very rigid ideas about what people should read. She didn't want me to read Gone with the Wind while I was 12 and 13. She wanted me to be more grown up before I read it. And then there were certain other books that she didn't think were worthwhile, and why spend your time on them. So she didn't have any of those in the library when she was there.
She was a lady with her own ideas, wasn't she?
She had very, very strong ideas. And I will say this, of the whole time that she was a librarian and they in the library, there was never a telephone in the building. And if she had had any kind of problem, she couldn't have called for help. And she was, most of the time, the only worker in the library. Sometimes there were some other girls that were there part of the time, but she was the only one there full time. And as far as I know, she never did have cause to need help, a call for it.
I have a feeling from what you said about your mother, she was well respected.
I think she was very well respected.
And probably a lot of the children knew if they were in trouble at the library, they were in trouble at home.
I think that's the way it was. And at that time, the fine for the library was 2 cents a day. If the book was overdue, it was 2 cents a day. And Mother did say, you can tell a lot about a person's character by the way they pay their 2-cent fine. Some people didn't want to pay it, and some people would let it hang on and hang on. It would get up to 10 cents or 14 cents, and they didn't want to pay it. And she said you can tell a lot about the character by the way they pay their fine at the library.
I would be in trouble, I imagine, because I'm so forgetful I might not get my books back. Do you think your mother enjoyed her work at the library?
Oh yes, I think so. She got to see a lot of people, and some of her friends would come during the hours that the library was open, and there was a chair always beside the desk where the visitor could sit in the visiting chair, and Mother would be in the librarian's chair, and they were close enough to visit back and forth. You couldn't talk loud, in the library, and they had to be right close together to be able to visit and talk. And I think she enjoyed it. Got to know a lot of people that way.
Today we would consider that a fringe benefit, I think.
I think so.
You talked about your life with Fred. Now, when you married, where did you live first?
We lived on Fairmount Avenue. Fred started building the house before we ever got married. And the house was built, and we moved into that. And then we built this house about 40 years ago, and we've been here since. We technically, we lived in town, and then we did live in a mobile home out here in the country while we were building this house. But he and I lived together in really only 2 houses.
You have some deep roots, don't you, Weesie?
I do. I have very deep roots.
I do know that you were instrumental or available to the group that started the museum in the library building. And I am of the understanding that actually what spurred that was the protecting of the building. And then the idea of the museum was, what will we do with it if we protect it? Is that right?
I was not in on the initial idea. I think it was Ella Bruner and Mary Peake and Georgia White. And those 3, I think that the city had thought they would tear down the Hawks Library and make a parking lot for the courthouse, or just get rid of the building. And Mary and Georgia and Ella said, "Oh no, we can't do that. It's too nice a building and too historic." And I think those 3 were the initial people who started it. And then I came in, I don't know how many years later, but I got in at the time when Mary Clyde Langford was president of the Historical Society, and she wanted to catalog all of the items that we had in the museum. That when the museum started, they didn't keep any kind of catalog, and we would have things and not know when we got them or where they came from. And she said, "We've got to go back and catalog everything." And that was a very big improvement and very, very needed.
And I'm sure a lot of work.
Well, yeah, we went, there were, I don't know, 6 or 8 of us that went up on a regular basis and wrote down everything. That if there was a table and it had 4 or 5 items, I remember saying, "Surely we don't have to write down every one of these items." And she said, "Yes, put down everything that's on this table." And that's the only way we could keep up with anything, record it. And we had a good time. And I think that was how I initially began working at the museum. Anna Ayers and I clicked, and we went up there and did a lot of that. We would go every week and catalog and work on things.
A lot of that is very much appreciated now. We have an extensive catalog, not all of which is on display anymore.
No. Well, this had to be done with paper and pen. We didn't have a computer or anything to record on.
Has there always been a fair-sized group that worked on the museum project, or has there been times when it seemed to be limited?
It varies, just like most things. There would be a group that would work for a while, and then it would dwindle down, and then something else would come along, and another group would be interested. I've always liked history, and I found it very interesting to find out about some of these things that happened years ago, although I can remember things that had happened a lot of years ago.
You said you were on Highland Avenue. I assume the railroad community was active over there at that time, too.
Yes. Now, I didn't ever live on Highland Avenue. The
Parkers were
lived
on Highland.
Highland
That's
Avenue.
right. You were always on College.
I was on College Street, and at that time, this town was made up of just certain neighborhoods. You lived on College Street, and you played with the people that lived in your neighborhood. And if you lived on Highland Avenue, you played with the people that lived up there or nearby. And then there was a nice residential area on South Main Street. And I know I had some friends that lived down there on South Main Street, and it was a very nice residential area. But we didn't have cars. We couldn't get back and forth to the different neighborhoods. We met these friends in school, and after we got a little bit more grown up and some of us could drive, we would drive to see our friends in other parts of town. But when you had to walk 8 or 10 blocks, it took all your afternoon to get there and walk back home. You didn't have much playing time left.
And I'm assuming then that the elementary schools were somewhat situated around town as well, or did you come together even in the early years of school?
There was only one elementary school when I started to school, and it was up there on College Street. It was a 2-story brick building, and the building is no longer there, and I don't know what they have. It was over the viaduct, over the bridge there on College Street on the right-hand side, and there's some sort of building on that lot now, and it has something to do with education. I don't know whether it's, I don't know exactly what it's used for, but it is not a school like with grades 1, 2, and 3 in it.
I'm thinking it's been different things over the years, and it's kind of a smaller 1-story structure, more of an industrial look than what we think of a school most of the time.
Yes, we're thinking of the same thing.
And I believe has housed from time to time adult education courses. I'm not sure what's there now.
I never have known exactly what was there, but they did tear down the old 2-story building, and that old 2-story building is featured in that film about Cedartown that was filmed back in the 1940s, and they show the old school with some of the first graders walking out of the school, and it was grade 1 through 4 when I was there, and then you went further up College Street to where the present Board of Education offices are. There was a school there, and a large part of the school has been torn down, and what is the Board of Education building is what was added on to the original school. The original school was torn down. We call that the junior high school. You went 4 through grades 1 and 4 on College Street, and then you moved up the street and went grades 5, 6, and 7. And I believe almost all the children in town went to the junior high school together. There was a grammar school down in the Mill Village on 3rd Street, I believe it was called the 3rd Street School. And then there was another school over there down the hill from Harp's home. And I can't remember what they called that. But it was grade 1 through 4. And then everybody got together for grades 5, 6, and 7, and then progressed to the high school. And we did not have a lunchroom. They let you out at lunchtime, and if you lived close enough, you would walk home and get your lunch and then walk back. Or if you lived too far, you'd brown bag it, take something with you to eat. And there wasn't a lunchroom per se. If you were carrying your lunch, you just eat it outside. There was no space provided for anybody to eat lunch.
Times are changing, aren't they, Weesie?
I'll say.
And how long have you been in attendance or a member of the First Methodist Church?
Since Fred and I married. And I don't think I joined the church in 52, but probably 53.
So you're a long-term member there and know a lot of people from Cedartown after the 50s.
I had a big decision to make because I'd been Baptist all my life, and we wanted to be in the same church. And I decided that I could make the switch to the Methodist church better than he could make the switch to the Baptist church. And I don't regret it. I have loved the Methodist church, and I like the people in the church.
When we think about Cedartown and we think about really big changes, and I know when they're happening day by day we don't think about it, but if you think back, what do you think are some of the bigger changes that you've seen?
Well, some of them, of course, have been good. I think the present Cedartown is not nearly as thriving and active as it was when I was growing up. There were a lot of stores on Main Street, and if you wanted to buy a dress or shoes or anything, you'd have 2 or 3 stores you could go in and look for things. Of course, part of that is just ordering things on the computer. And we used to hoot about that. When somebody ordered something from Sears Roebuck, we thought, oh, we got that out of a catalog. That was terrible. But it's a pretty good way of getting it.
Oh, convenience has turned us, I think.
Yes, very much so.
What about grocery stores? Have you seen a change in the way we buy our groceries?
Yes, yes, indeed. When Fred and I married, we bought groceries from Vance and Hunt grocery store, and it was on Main Street. Uh, I don't know what's in that building now, but for a long time Eddie Hilburn had a antique shop in that particular building, and they would you could order your groceries in the morning, and they would send it out to you to try to have and cook for lunch. You had to get your order in fairly early so they could get it up and then get it delivered to you. And if you now I never did order a chicken, but when I was growing up, if you ordered a chicken, it would be a live chicken, and the cook would have to wring the chicken's neck, and that was quite an ordeal. I didn't ever like to look at that, but Mother ordered her groceries from Vance and Hunt, and the Hunt was the father of Van Hunt. He was Mr. Posey Hunt, who was Van's father, and he was in business with a Mr. George Vance. They were in business for a long time.
And Mr. Hunt's son married the aforementioned Beth.
Yes, that's right.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. You and Beth must have been really good friends if you were the first person that came to mind when her brother wanted a date.
We were pretty good friends. At that particular point, both of us were teaching school at Perks Junior High School, and she was teaching for a year or two before she married Van, and I taught for 3 or 4 years, and we did have a good time going around together.
She was a wonderful lady. I enjoyed Miss Beth.
Yes, she was a good person.
Do you remember, is there any other particular memory that stands out in your mind?
Well, I know it sounds like I'm so old, but I do remember waking up when I was a young child in the early morning hours, and I could hear a horse clopping down College Street, and it was the milk wagon coming. I had a milkman that delivered with a horse and buggy, and I can remember that. And the milk came from the Hand Dairy, and the Hands lived in the house where Dale Tuck lives now. The Gamages lived in that house for a long time, but that was the Hand home place, and they had a dairy and delivered milk. And you would get up in the morning and find your quart of milk or 2 quarts of milk, whatever your order was, right there. And it was not homogenized. You would see it with the cream on the top, and if you wanted not to drink skim milk, you had to remember to shake the bottle up so you would homogenize it yourself.
Did you ever use that cream to make ice cream and that kind of thing? Did you ever skim it off and keep that part?
No, but we would oftentimes, if you needed some cream, they'd say, remember to pour the cream off before you shake the bottle. And we did use it in coffee and things like that. But I also have a lot of memories of the Depression. Things were hard to come by, and I think I'm a little more careful about not lavishing things around because we had such a hard time having anything. And my brother and I never went to bed hungry. Mother and Daddy saw to it that we had something to eat, but they had a really difficult time during the Depression. After the Depression and just before the World War II, my daddy left the paper mill down there, and he was appointed the first manager of the employment service in Cedartown. And it was a government, a United States employment service. And then after some time, I don't know, a few years, it was taken over by the state of Georgia. And so it was the Georgia State Employment Service. But when he went to work, it was U.S. Employment Service. I think that was part of the recovery from the Depression. They started that, like they started the CCC for the boys to go to work, and this was another means to get people back to work, and he got in on the first of it, and he was the first manager of the employment service in Cedartown. And the office was on the corner of Main Street and Grace, where I believe it's Keela's photo shop is now. And that's where the first employment service was.
So that a lot of people could walk in rather
Yeah.
than have to have other types of transportation.
And that was very important. People needed to be able to walk to go uptown and shop, or to go to an employment service. Anything. They didn't have I have the cars, and they didn't have the money to have cars or buy gas. So it was a tough time.
And then we talked about the 5 and 10 cent stores.
Oh yes.
Were they always around, or were they called
As far as
by
I
other
can
names?
remember, there were 2 or 3 5 and 10 cent stores in Cedartown. Roy Philpott's daddy, Horace Philpott, had a 10-cent store that was in the block where Perkle's Deli is now. And it was about 2 doors up from Perkle's, nearer the traffic light. And then there was a big 10-cent store, I think it was Rosie's, that was across Main Street there where the
One of the realty companies. I know.
Yes, it's a realty company there, and I can't think of the name of it.
Is that Hardy's, maybe? It's where Jane Wyatt was.
Yes, it was in that building. There was a big 10-cent store there.
Right under the traffic light.
Yes.
At the end of West Avenue.
West
where
Avenue
it
dead
comes
end,
into Maine,
right
yeah.
And to the south of the 10-cent store was the building where Liberty National Bank started, and Liberty National became First National Bank, and now it is Suncrest. But the building next to the realty place, if you look at it, it has a marble-looking facade, and that was Liberty National Bank. And that was a prime location for it.
And when Liberty moved, they moved over on West Avenue across from the theater,
Correct. They
which
built.
is a building where the museum may someday be housed.
Yes, yes. And we all wondered about their moving off Main Street, but cars were more accessible and people were much more mobile, and they needed a drive-in window place to more parking for people to be able to get in. And of course the building straight across from the post office where the county office is now was built as the commercial bank building, and then it had been on Main Street, and they felt like they needed a bigger building and more parking place, so they built that building, and later it was sold to C&S built banking, and then I don't remember exactly what happened there, but C&S, I think, decided to close smaller offices, and it was after that that the county bought the building.
Do you remember which building on Main Street the commercial bank was in?
Yes. If you start with the corner there, right, Main Street, and Moa's is on the south corner, right across from it, across West Avenue, the first building was Cobb's dry goods store, and the second building was a large building, and it was Stubbs and Hogg Furniture, and that's the one that they call the Houseel building now. And just on the other side of the Houseel building is where the commercial bank was. And next to it was the Philpott's dime store. And then beyond that was a little dry goods store, Stone and Huff, or Stone and Allred was in there. And then beyond that was Hunt Jewelry Company. And then there was a little place called the Fruit Stand. And the Fruit Stand is what is now Perkles. And Perkles bought the old jewelry store building and cut a hole in the wall, and that made access there. And let's see, Hunt Drugstore was the next thing beyond the fruit stand. And then the building on the corner where Bussey's Flowers is has been a number of different things. At one time, the jewelry store moved down there, and I think after that, even Casey's grocery store had a store they started in right there in that on that corner. There have been several things there.
Do you remember any of the other movie theaters other than West Avenue that were on Main Street?
Yes. There was the Cedar Theater, which was down on Main Street, somewhere beyond where the bakery is. And that's where I went when I was growing up, and it was a Cedar. And you could go in in the afternoon for a dime, and you could spend all afternoon. And if you wanted to see the movie 3 times, you sat there, and as long as your mother let you sit there.
Mm.
But they would come and fish you out of the movie after a while. And the movie cost a dime, and I do not know exactly what popcorn cost. Right at first, I don't think they had popcorn and snacks to eat. I don't remember that until I got a little bit older. In junior high school or high school, they began to sell it. And somewhere I have read or heard that the movies, the theaters began serving popcorn and selling Cokes and things like that to make a little more money during the Depression. They weren't making a lot of money just on admittance. And they thought, well, we'll serve something to eat and we'll make a little more money. And that's where it all got started.
That's interesting.
I don't know whether that's absolutely true or not, but I've heard that.
Do you remember the Princess Theater?
No, I don't remember the Princess. I remember the name, but I don't think I was ever in the Princess that I can remember.
Were there always grocery stores on Main that you remember?
Yes.
More than one, right?
Oh, yeah. Mark Cornelius had a grocery store on South Main, and he delivered groceries. He had a good business, and there was a Mr. Cameron. I don't know that he was in business quite the whole time that these others were, but Mr. Cameron had a grocery store, started on the corner of North Main and West Avenue. Well, I guess that was East Avenue. It's right there where all those service stations are now.
Where Ed's Clean, well, no, it'd be further down than Ed's Cleaners.
Yes, it's where the road from Rockmont crosses Main Street, right there, big intersection. Mr. Cameron had a store there. I think Glenn York Sr. started a store there. And I remember walking to that store when I was a little girl. You could take a nickel and walk from College Street. That was just sort of 2 blocks up there. And you go in there and you could buy a bag full of candy for a nickel. The only reason I did not like to walk there, you had to walk across from the jail, and the people in the jail would whistle at you and call out to you, and I didn't like that. But if I wanted candy bad enough, I would do it.
We do a lot for our sweets, don't we?
That's right.
Mm. Do you remember a Piggly Wiggly in Cedartown?
Yes, and it was up on Main Street. I've forgotten exactly where, but
Would that have been earlier or later?
early.
Early.
It was in the same block where Moa's was on the corner. There was Moa's, and then there was a dress shop, Ralph's Dress Shop, and then Penny's, J.C. Penney was there. And then Clark Mercer's men's store. Where Clark Mercer's store was built, I can remember before it was built, and it was just red dirt, and people that came in from the country would park their wagons and their mules there. I can remember seeing that when I was a little girl.
And I don't know the time frame, and I'm probably way, way off, but in your early knowledge, being a Baptist to start with, I'm guessing maybe First Baptist, since you were in the house next door.
Yeah.
You can't remember the church being on Main, I'm sure.
Not on Main, no. I remember it when it was there on the lot next to the Historical Society. I attended that church and the Sunday school that is still standing there.
Mm. That was a beautiful old building. But when I look at that parking lot and how it's sinking and how hard they tried just to keep pavement on the parking lot, I understand why that building must have been so hard to maintain, because it was so heavy.
And there probably was.
There must be springs or something under there. Because that parking lot
I think there's a spring under the Historical Society, under the Hawks Library. I think.
When I know how hard we have to fight to keep that basement in decent shape, I'm sure you're probably right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's been part of the problem all along, because evidently there was some sort of rise there, because the house that I remember behind the library was sitting up high, like it had to be 8 or 10 feet tall for me to be able to see underneath the house. The house sat on a mound that was 8 or 10 feet tall, and beyond that house, right where Adam Zucker motor place, tire place is, there was a blacksmith that shoed horses and mules right there, and I expect he chose that spot because it was right near the courthouse, and people had to come in on mules or horse, and it was just like getting a tire fix. They needed new shoes for the horse, and they could get the shoes done while they were doing business at the courthouse.
Now, you've taught me something. That's one I didn't know about. I've heard stories of what was where, but I'd not, if I did, it didn't register with me.
Well,
but that was a blacksmith shop.
That was on the other side of this house that was behind the library. The house was up, and it was up high, and the blacksmith had dug out a place in there. I don't remember what kind of building he had. If it was, of course, it wasn't anything real fancy, but it had to be something like a barn type thing or a shed of some sort. But the blacksmith was there. I can remember that. My children think I'm so old.
But your family lived right there in town, so they probably didn't keep a horse and buggy.
No, but my daddy kept a cow in the backyard of College Street. We had a cow when I was growing up.
And who did the milking?
Daddy did.
Well, good for Daddy. In my house, Mama had to.
Oh no, Daddy had to milk the cow, and at other times we had chickens in the backyard. We raised the chickens mostly for the eggs, and this was all during the Depression, and it's hard to believe that was right there on College Street that it was allowed, but there were no rules against it.
What was on the corner where First Baptist is, which would have been next door to that house?
The Will Trawick house. Mr. Will Trawick and his wife Julia, and the house I think has a very interesting story. Um, Julia Trawick was a Stovall from Madison, Georgia, and one of her older sisters married a Mr. Adamson who lived in Cedartown. That was not the Mr. Charles Adamson that built the house up there across from the post office, but this house was built by the parents of the Stovall girls for, I believe her name was Lena Stovall, and she married a Mr. Adamson, and they built a house and gave it to them as a wedding present. And this is the house that's on Herbert Street, just beyond where Seed and Smoke Restaurant was. And there's a big house that sits on the right of Herbert Street, immediately next to the Seed and Smoke. And it's still there, and I don't know who lives in it now.
Is it kind of on a rise?
Yes.
They call it now the Richardson House.
All right. Well, that house was built as a wedding gift for Lena Stovall and Mr. Adamson. And Lena had a party here in Cedartown for the young people when they were first married, I think, and she invited her sister Julia to come from Madison to the party. And at the party, Miss Julia met Will Trawick, and they married, and the Stovalls built a house for them on the corner of College and Wissahickon, the big house that was on the corner. So the Stovalls built two really big houses in Cedartown for each of their two daughters. Or they may have had other daughters, I don't know, but for two of their daughters. And the Trawicks lived in that house. They were the only people that ever lived in that house until it was sold to the Baptist church and torn down.
Well, now that's another story that I was not aware of. I think these are wonderful facts we're getting, but are you tired?
I'm a little weary.
Your voice is beginning to crack too, so what do you think if we stop and maybe we'll do another session one day?
Well, if you can put up with me.
Well, you know now what